Hello and welcome. My name is Leah Kopke. I'm a 3D motion design freelancer, and this is my podcast, Ambient 3D Animations. Today, I'm super excited to go through all the settings you need to know to export your textures out of Substance 3D Painter to get them ready for whatever render you're working in, whether if that's Unreal Engine or Redshift or something else. You'll be able to feel confident that you can export out to any render engine by the end of this. So something you would want to double check regardless of what you are exporting out of Substance 3D Painter into as a render is you want to make sure that the color space matches. So check your renderer, whatever you're using, and once you do that, check the color space. And then in here, if you go under the Edit menu, under Project Configuration, if you scroll down to color management, you can see your color management style. And right now mine is set to legacy. If I choose something like Open Color IO, that will allow me to have more options down here. You can see that I scroll down and I have way more options once I switch into that. And the default is sRGB, or I can use Rec 709, but you can see you can even use ACES, so you have all of these options. RAW, you can use all of these different options, which is really wonderful to have these in here. For right now, I'll choose this because I think that'll work in what we're using. Bitmap import color space defaults. So if you're having a 16-bit image, you can decide what these are and such. And you can see that you can choose different color spaces for how many bits you're working with in here. And you could choose whatever works best for your project. And once you have all that set, we can hit OK. And you can see we're going to export out this pumpkin spice cheesecake today as an example. We painted it in another episode, so if you want to check that out, you can. I'm going to go into File, Export, and you can export textures, and you can even use the hotkey listed here, Control-Shift-E, or you can just click that button. And we're going to go through everything here, all the settings, so that you can export into any render and not feel confused or like you're searching for something. So here in our settings, you can see we have our different texture sets listed. So I only have one texture set for this, and if I click on this, you'll see a lot more information, the file type, size, and such, and you can see the actual maps that will be output. And we'll go into a little bit more detail of how to adjust what we're outputting. So we'll go through that once we get into this over here. I'll go back into our global settings. I'll hit that button there. You have your output directory, so I can choose where I'm going to save this to. So I'm going to click on this right here. And I'll go into my folder for this project. And you'll see that I have 3 folders set up: PBR, Redshift, Unreal Engine, because I'm going to show in this video how to export textures for each one of these. Let's start off with PBR first. So I'll select this one. This one's really universal. A PBR texture you can find in almost any renderer. So I think that this is a great way to start. So I'll select this folder, and we'll do that one first. Our output template, we're actually going to make a new one, so we'll talk a little bit about that more in a moment. Your file type, you can use a TIFF, a PNG, you can choose your file type here, you can choose how many bits you'd like. 8 bits plus dithering, that helps reduce banding when you have fewer bits, like 8 bits. I'm going to choose 16 bits for right now. You can choose your size. Right now it's set to based on each texture set size, but the really nice thing about Substance Painter is that it will, regardless of what you painted it in, you can scale it up to be a higher resolution if you'd like it, or make it smaller. So you can control that right now. I'm going to leave mine based on each texture set size. For padding, we have a few different options. So when you have a texture and you want to leave some extra color going beyond the edge of your islands on that texture, that helps reduce those black lines that can sometimes appear in seams when you UV map a texture. So this Dilation Infinite, it stretches the color beyond those islands until they basically hit the edge of the texture itself or another island. So dilation, basically that means that you can choose how many pixels that goes beyond the edge. Like maybe you aren't having them go all the way, the color of the texture go all the way to the edge. Maybe you're choosing 10 or 20 pixels or something like that. And then when it says transparent, that means the space beyond that island and beyond that dilation of the island's colors is transparent. Or you can choose default background color, diffusion, so diffusion color. So you have different options in here. And I think Dilation Infinite works in most cases, so I'm just going to leave it on that. But just in case if you want to know the others, now you do. You can choose to export a USD asset, and that's just another file type. It usually includes the mesh and the textures. Export shaders, parameters. Now in our case, we already have an FBX that we imported in here, and all I want are the textures, so I don't need to worry about exporting out a mesh. This reset all at the bottom will reset all of your settings, so if you press a bunch of buttons and you wanted to go back to the original, no worries. Just hit this button here. I know we all experiment with things and sometimes press things we shouldn't have. Just press reset all and you're back to where you started. You can cancel what we're doing, or you can save your settings. And export will, of course, export out whatever you have set up here. Now that's our settings tab. Let's talk about our output templates. So this is where it starts looking a little bit more complicated, but we're going to break this down, and you can handle this. Anyone can handle this when they get into it. It looked intimidating to me first when I looked at it too. So under your presets, you'll have this list of presets that basically come with this. And we have Keyshot in here, Corona, Arnold, PBR, Metallic Roughness. This is what we're really going to be working with today, but we're going to adjust that a little bit. You have Redshift, you have, what else do we have? Unreal Engine, we're going to be talking about that in a little bit. You can select one of these. If you right click on it, you can rename, duplicate, remove. You can also hit this to duplicate this little icon here. You can remove with this icon. You can add a new one here. And if I click on one of these, you'll see, oh, this updates. So this is the preset. And in here, you'll see your actual output maps all set up. And we'll break this down in a little bit. But let's talk about this PBR Metallic Roughness. And let's talk a little bit about the naming here for these. So you can see we have this kind of looks like a $ mesh. So that means that's going to add in the name of our mesh. And then texture set with a $. So then it'll name the texture set and then the base color. So in my situation, I don't really want that mesh, but you can see what texture is being used here. So I just want to break down what is on the screen because it can look overwhelming at first. And then you'll see that we can create different types of maps, and they have different channels for how the data is held. Gray is a grayscale channel, RGB is red, green, blue, and a channel R plus G plus B is red plus green plus B as separate channels. RGB plus A is red, green, blue plus an alpha channel, and then R plus G plus B plus A is separating out the red, green, blue, and alpha channel so that they can all carry data. The dollar symbol next to the output maps names is where you can select additional standardized naming systems, like you can add in $ mesh, and what that does is it grabs the name of whatever your mesh was that you imported and inserts that so that you can have that in your naming system. So it's a standardized way of naming, but you can pick what you'd like to do, if you'd like to name based on your project, on your mesh, and so on. R plus G plus B will break it into sections. So if I were to click on this, you'll see that I'll add a new one and we'll have these new channels in here, RGB. And then you can select the file type in here, you can select the number of bits and such. So that's just a way to hold more information in separate channels in one image. So you can break it up like that. You can see that for the colors, it makes sense to have RGB as one. We're using those colors to just use as the base color. So you don't really need to separate that in here. But, you know, for something that's grayscale, like let's see what this is. This one is for roughness. So this one is roughness. You really only need that to be grayscale. So that's set up as a grayscale texture, grayscale channel. So PNG, you can choose your number of bits, and then you'll see you have this duplicate icon here. So you can duplicate it, you can get rid of it with this X. Now this should feel a little bit less intimidating to look at this. And then the other thing that I want to point out to you is the colors. So this one is purple, and you'll notice that that's purple because we're driving that data from the base color, and this is purple. And then you'll see the emissive one matches up with, I believe this. Is this the emissive? Yes. So the emissive is green and this is green. So they're all kind of color coordinated. You can see that we're using normal DirectX for our normal. And let's say I want to change this a little bit and I want to make my own custom one. And let's say I want a DirectX and an OpenGL normal map. Now, for those of you who are a little bit newer to normal maps, it simulates a bump texture, and there are two different languages, basically, that programs will use in order to read that. And this is RGB data, so DirectX and OpenGL are just two different ways of reading the RGB data to make the bumpy look on the surface of your object. So DirectX is often used with things like Unreal Engine, and OpenGL is used with Redshift. So they all use different normal maps, and you just need to Google which one yours is using. Well, for right now, I want to export both. So we have this preset selected, and I want to make a duplicate of it. So I'm going to hit this because we're going to make a duplicate and then we're going to change it. So now we're going to use what we learned. I'm going to right click on this and rename it. And I'll say both normals so that I know that this is the new texture we are creating. And now we're going to duplicate this normal texture here because we want OpenGL and DirectX so that we can import this into any 3D software that might be reading the normals different. Because again, we were talking about how this is pretty universal to have a PBR texture, which is a physical-based render. We're going to go ahead and adjust this. So again, we're duplicating. So I'll hit that duplicate button. And we can see that we have one here. Now we're going to adjust the name. I don't really want the name of my original mesh because the name of the texture set is enough for me here because I only have one texture set. So I'm going to delete that stuff at the beginning because it's not necessary for me. You can do whatever naming system you like. This is the default that they chose for this, and if we were doing something more complicated, it may make sense. Not necessary for me, though. Okay, so in the second normal map, I want to name this Open GL. And I want to drag the Open GL over to here, and you'll see we get an automated new color. Once I choose what I want this to be added to, I want it to be added to the RGB channel, but you'll see you have those different options in there, so I'll select that, and you can see the colors match, so that all looks good and correct. And then for this other one, we want this to be called DirectX. But you can see that these maps are all kind of organized by their name. Input maps, mesh maps, converted maps. So you can see all different options in here. And then if you want to see how your naming system would look, you can actually click on this other tab, List of Exports. And we can see everything listed here. But you'll notice that we need to update something because this isn't having my new naming or even what I had selected. So we actually need to go back into our settings tag. And you'll notice that we need to update the output template because we made a new one. So I'll click on this, and this should be it, the both normals. And then when we go back into list of exports, you'll see that this is corrected. Pumpkin cheesecake base color, and then it has the updated color that we had chosen for the color space. You can see your texture size. You can see that I'm working in 4K. And we have a TIFF file here, 16 bits. Some of these are raw, some of these are Rec 709. And that all looks good to me. And we should have everything set up. It doesn't hurt to double check our work. And once everything looks good, we can save these settings if we'd like, or we could just hit export. I'm going to hit export. And then in our folder, under PBR, you'll see that we have all of our textures in here. And you'll notice that I actually exported out more than I need because I'm not using a height map. I'm really just using the normal maps for this. But I just wanted you to know what that would look like in case if you are working with a height map. So I included that, but it's not really necessary for my project. So now that we know PBR, which is universal, let's break down Redshift and Unreal Engine. Okay. So let's go back over to our settings. We've got our pumpkin cheesecake selected, which is all good and dandy. Now we're going to need to change our output template. So actually, let's do Redshift first. So I'm going to go in my output template. I'm going to find the Redshift, and we went through those settings. All looks good. We can double check how our Redshift looks in here. So let's go ahead and find our Redshift. And you'll see basically the setup here. Now, the thing that I want to change again is the naming. I don't really feel like I need the mesh. And then the other thing that I just want to point out is if you are starting one from scratch, where to find those. So if you hit this button here, you'll see these. And Substance 3D Painter calls these flags. In other software, sometimes they're called tokens. And they're basically saying they're automated ways to name. So grab information to name it a certain way. You can name it by your project, your mesh, your texture set, and such and such and such. And I'm going to delete this because I don't need it. So we'll take care of that here. So now we can check our list of exports. We've got our color, we have displacement, height field, we have emission color, metalness, normal, roughness. So then that basically exports that out so that you can build a Redshift material. So I need to make sure that I am exporting this out to the correct folder. So I'm going to change this from the PBR folder to the Redshift folder, and I'll hit select folder and export. Now let's see what we have inside of our Redshift folder. So these all are looking good to me. Lovely. Now let's talk about what's next. Let's talk about Unreal Engine. So in our settings, we're going to need to change this from Redshift to Unreal Engine. And you should be beginning to get a sense of how this works so that if you're working in any renderer, you can do this yourself and set it up. Yeah, so let's go ahead and find our Unreal Engine. Unreal Engine packed in here, nice. And you can really make something custom with all of these. I mean, Substance 3D Painter has it all, doesn't it? List of exports. So you could see this is pretty minimal what we need here. But I want to point out something really interesting that Redshift, I'm sorry, not that Redshift, that Unreal Engine does that's a little bit different than the last one we did. So you'll notice that here we have the 3 channels, and we talked briefly about this, but I'm going to go into it a little bit more in depth since we're using it here. So you'll see the naming here is occlusion, roughness, and metallic. So the occlusion is taking up the R channel, the roughness is taking up the G channel, and the B channel is metallicness. So I'm going to show you in another video. Right after this one, I'll do a few videos on how to actually create the materials in different renderers. But for this one, these are going to actually be 3 different ports that the data is coming out to and feeding into these. I'll show you with the nodes. We'll do the nodes together. So no worries if this isn't making sense now. But when I explain it later and you remember this, it'll all of a sudden click. So if it's not clicking now, that's okay. But we will go through this in greater depth. But you can see that those 3 channels are actually kind of in a way saving you data because it's in a sense fitting 3 texture maps all into one texture. So it's kind of neat and cool how this one works, the Unreal Engine one. It makes sense for gaming because you're always trying to save data with that. So, or save space. So there we go, we got our settings set up and we're gonna make sure that we're exporting out to the right folder, and we are not. So let's go ahead and choose Unreal Engine, select folder, check on these, make sure that they look nice, and export. And again, you can choose whatever is best for your project. These are just examples. And I don't even need the emissive because, let's be honest, cheesecakes don't glow, but I want to show the setup for it so that if you do have an emissive material, you know how to do that. Okay, so let's go ahead and see what we have here. Going back into our recording folder, we're talking about Unreal Engine. So here are our textures. And in the next videos, I will show you how to set these up inside of Redshift, inside of Cinema 4D and Unreal Engine. And of course, if you have any questions for me, leave it in the comments. And again, I really appreciate all you guys giving me a thumbs up or hitting subscribe because that really helps support my channel and supports me making these videos. And I hope to see you here next time on Ambient 3D Animations, where we're going to actually make the materials. So I'm excited for that. I'll see you soon. Bye.